welcome. My name is Nikita Patel, and I'm Senior Director of the Executive Leadership Programs at Newmark J School at CUNY. And today we're very excited to be spending the next hour with you during our open house. So we're here today to talk about the Executive Program in News Innovation and Leadership. And the great news is applications for this program just opened last week, and they are open until June the 2nd. So if you have any questions or thoughts or anything, don't hesitate to visit our website. We'll be dropping links in the chat here as well for the application form and our general page, but you can always reach out to me anytime. I'm still on Twitter, so at Nikita, barely hanging on, and then I'm on LinkedIn, Mastodon, I'm everywhere basically, and I'll be sharing my email address at the end as well if you wanted to reach out to me directly. So I'm joined today by two special guests. So Steely Sharamboulis, who is publisher and CEO of the Daily Maverick, and Kim Bowie from the Arizona Republic, who oversees product and audience. And so what I'm going to be doing today is giving a brief overview of our program, and then we'll have a Q&A with the two of them. And then we'll, of course, open it up for questions with everyone who's joining us today. And so if you have questions, please don't hesitate to drop them in the chat or raise your hand, especially after the panel discussion. When we do Q&A, we definitely want to have a robust discussion. And again, feel free, no pressure if you want to unmute and ask a question at that time, or just drop it in the chat. This is a very casual and fun event. So without further ado, I want to talk about the executive program and what it is. And the reason the executive program was created a few years ago is basically to ensure that there are great modern newsroom leaders who are equipped to lead newsrooms into this modern era of journalism. We want to make sure that we have leaders out there who are driving change, building successful products, and innovating with various business models as well. In doing a lot of research for this program, the two main folks behind the program are actually Anita Zialina, who has joined us today, and then Jeff Jarvis. So they are advisors to the program, instructors, and I'm incredibly thankful to have their guidance. And so in preparing for launching this program a few years ago, a lot of research was conducted, and here's what we were hearing from the marketplace. News executives were telling us that they wanted folks that were product thinkers at the leadership level in newsrooms. Newsroom leaders were telling us they wanted a diverse pool of talent. They wanted a pipeline in order to hire amazing leaders to drive change in their organizations. They also wanted a mix of editorial and business savvy folks who understand what's happening in the industry and how to move their newsrooms forward when it comes to growth. Our mission with the executive program in news innovation and leadership is to equip a diverse group of changemakers with knowledge, skills, and the network necessary to lead transformation of the news business. So what makes our program unique? There are actually a number of great programs out there, and they're all really awesome. But what makes our program unique is, first of all, me. So I'm the new program director, and I'm bringing sort of my own flavor and approach to this incredible program. But the reason I particularly love this program is because we are sort of at the intersection of editorial, product, business, and technology. So by taking this program, you get a sort of well-rounded 360 news leadership training. And that is, to me, the value proposition of our program. In the sort of format of our program, it's basically an academic year long, where there are 3 different residencies in New York City. So a residency is a week-long stint where there are classes and activities in Manhattan where we all gather together 3 times a year. And then throughout the year, there are weekly classes and different virtual events as well. Each of the cohorts have around 20 members of 20 diverse leaders from various newsrooms all around the world. And again, whether they might be sort of from editorial, product, technology, the business side, that's the beauty of the program, is that our cohorts are just made up of incredible people, and which we hope that some of you all will be part of the next cohort too. As I mentioned, there are classes and workshops led by myself, the faculty at Newmark J School, and we have a number of incredible instructors. And during those week-long residencies, we do site visits, field trips, we have fireside chats. We do all kinds of things within New York City, even social activities as well. So in addition to all the learning within the program, every participant is also paired with an executive coach. And that coach is there for guidance within the program, for their everyday jobs, and then also for each participant's capstone project. And so I'm particularly, I love the capstone projects. They're really interesting. And in some cases, some folks will have a project based on their own news organization. And a capstone project really is, identifying a problem or a challenge and then coming up with solutions. And so in some cases that takes the form of a business plan, a product development roadmap, or an audience development strategy. And so these capstone projects are really awesome and can often have impact in the entire news industry as well. And here's a look at our syllabus. So we have an amazing array of different classes that we cover. So within the program, folks learn about the business of journalism, finance, product development, revenue models, business development, technology, innovation, audience development, managing culture and change, and DEIB, just to name a few of the classes. And then we host workshops centered on career development, leading with resilience, negotiations, dealing with resistance, managerial decision-making. And as I mentioned, ongoing activities are folks working on their capstone projects in the background, receiving coaching and mentoring. We have networking events, fireside chats, company visits, etc., and then leadership circles as well. So in order to complete the program and get a certificate of completion, participants are expected to attend weekly classes, prepare for those classes. There are often readings to be done or case studies ahead of time, and occasional assignments as well. As I mentioned, there are 3 of those week-long residencies in New York City, which can be intense, but they're also really fun. And then, of course, participants should be completing and presenting their strategic capstone projects as well. So in terms of outcomes of the program, what you can expect at the end of the program is to be able to build and execute a product strategy. You will be able to understand what's happening in the market when it comes to business models, revenue streams, and growth strategies. You will learn how to have totally different and unique approaches to understanding and analyzing data, and then having audience-centric strategies. You will be up to speed with the latest best practices in the industry when it comes to organizational structure, revenue, business innovation, of course, leadership. That's the key thread of this entire program. You will not only develop your own leadership skills, but you'll learn how to be able to attract and retain diverse talent and manage teams as well more effectively. And you will be a change maker, right? A lot of you already are a change maker. So we want to make sure that we enable you to be a really strong change agent in your news organization and in the news industry to manage transformation. And of course, going through this program, you'll have lasting relationships with members of your cohort, with folks at Newmark J School, within the New York City media ecosystem, and then more broadly within this journalism sphere globally as well. So you might ask how much the program costs. So it is $27,000 to complete the program. That includes tuition, coaching, all the learning materials and events that I mentioned. This doesn't include travel and lodging when it comes to those New York City residencies. And some of you might be asking if there's any assistance available. So the good news is we do have some funders that do help to provide scholarships for folks to be able to take the program. And so there are a limited number of scholarships. And in some cases, those might cover the tuition in its entirety. And in other cases, they might cover a partial amount of that. And so a lot of news organizations may also have learning and training development budgets as well. So if you want to have a conversation one-on-one with me about financial assistance, we can definitely make that happen. And then here's the timeline of the program as well. So this next cohort for 2024 kicks off this September, right after Labor Day. In fact, in New York City is where we have the first residency where everyone gets to mingle. We start classes and activities together in person. Then we have weekly virtual classes until the end of February, where we have our second residency back at Newmark J School. And then we end in June with graduation and whatnot. And so this is just a key look at some of the dates here. And here's a look at the current cohort. So the current cohort is a mix, as you can see, of gender, of diversity, of folks from all over the world, from all kinds of newsrooms as well, both big and small, on a local, regional, and global scale too. This is the second cohort, also just an incredible range of folks. And what makes me so happy about the second cohort too is that last year I was actually a coach for the program, and I'm still in touch with two of the members of the cohort that I coached, and they've become friends and peers, which is incredible. And then here's a quick look at the first cohort. And so I'm really excited that we have two members of this cohort here for us to have a discussion with today. And you can find information about previous cohorts on our website too. So as I mentioned, that's really it, and a big overview of the program, and I'm happy to take questions in a minute. Here's information about our website. If you want to reach out to me, my email address is just nikita.patel@journalism.cuny.edu. I'm always available to chat and answer any questions that you might have. Before we get into our discussion, I would be remiss if I didn't mention our summer boost. So my colleague Anita Zialina will be hosting a transformation boost at Newmark J School July 5th, 6th, and 7th. And then I will be hosting a 3-day engagement boost on July 10th, 11th, and 12th. So if you want to sign up or want more information, don't hesitate to go to Newmark J School's website, click on J+, and look for summer boost information. And then now let's go to our special guests that we have, Steely and Kim. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so we can have a conversation. So first of all, I think the world of the two of you, and the fact that we're talking today about this program just brings me so much joy. So Kim, first I would love to start with you. Would you mind sharing sort of why you applied for the program? I think I would just be curious to know that.
Sure. So I do not have a master's in anything, but particularly journalism. And I have been at this kind of, place like not quite executive leadership, almost executive leadership for some time. And I had wondered, can I do this? Do I want to run a newsroom? Can I run a newsroom? Do I have the skills? And I had not really wanted to take a year off to go back and get a master's or an MBA, which is what a lot of my friends and colleagues were doing at the time. And when this program came around, I was like, oh, this is like the perfect mix. I can still work, and I will learn pretty much what you will learn from like an MBA, but with a tilt towards what journalism is. And I went into the program with the question of like, can I run a newsroom, and what do I need to learn to run a newsroom as an executive editor or editor-in-chief? And I definitely feel like I got that. It was an incredibly transformational program. I have been through other leadership programs in the past. I was a pointer leadership in diversity, part of that cohort, and I was part of a couple other cohorts, but this was a little bit different than all of those. And it was as much about the cohort as it was about what we learned.
Amazing, thank you. How about you, Steely?
Yeah, so I'm a founder of the Daily Maverick. This is my first gig in media 14 years ago, a one-night stand that turned into this long-term commitment. And it's been a roller coaster ride ever since then. And this gig, this job of running a media business in this day and age through this age of digital disruption in a country like South Africa, with all its extra sprinklings of challenges on top of that, there's no handbook for that. And so there were a couple of times when we did invest in development and training and innovation. And this was an opportunity to do all of that in one go. And I think if I could sum it up is to try and make some of the unknowns known to us so that we could know what to do next. And I think that was really great to kind of start putting together what is this handbook look like in leading and growing and building the kind of innovative culture that we want to have throughout the organization, and then also meeting up with people and a chance to geek out on these things that we just never really have that opportunity to do down in South Africa. And so those were all the big reasons that kind of drew me to this opportunity.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. And I agree wholeheartedly with you too. Like when we have weekly classes, it's really incredible the things we talk about, the challenges we face collectively, the solutions we can help each other with. And then Kim, what you said really resonated with me about a sort of journalism MBA too, right? Like nothing like this program exists in terms of having a 360 kind of educational approach to being a news leader today. And so that's what has drawn me to the program from the beginning as well. So yeah, so I'd love to know from both of you, let me start with Silly this time. So Silly, what were some of your favorite classes and your favorite moments from when you were taking the program?
Yeah, there were quite a few classes on strategy and innovation and change. And I think a lot of our eyes popped out of our head when we realized why so many of our change projects had failed. And there was this simple model that we could follow to really reduce the risk and to give our projects a greater chance of success. So those ones really resonated with me. I really enjoyed them. They really kind of stimulated the parts of my personality that and parts of my work that I really enjoy. And there's quite a wide array of things that we covered. I also enjoyed working on my capstone throughout the year. It was a really challenging piece of work, and I will talk about that a little bit more. But then, and then also the opportunity to engage with my coach, who I also keep in touch with these days. We still get the chance to either bump into each other in some context or make time to connect, and so that's also been really good. And yeah, there were so many great classes and interactions and workshops, and also to get the chance to visit New York as well. That was also really cool.
Wonderful, amazing. How about you, Kim? Some of your favorite classes and moments?
I also love the change management classes in general, because and particularly we were the pandemic class, I like to call us, as in addition to the OG class, but we were the pandemic class, and we had a lot of change to manage through and a lot of adjustment, and the program like made room for us to talk about that and to honestly just have a few therapy sessions about how everything was going in our lives and careers, which was exceedingly helpful. I also, in our residency, really enjoyed the finance class. I'm not a numbers person. I've never been good with numbers, and that has always been part of executive leadership that scares me. Like, oh no, I don't know how to run a P&L. I don't even know what a P&L actually is. And all of those, that day was a little, I still use my notes from that day when I'm working on other things. But and then lastly, I think the opportunity not just to work on my capstone, but to work with others on their capstones too. Like we read each other's capstones, we like gave each other feedback. It was a really nice situation, so we weren't like working in a black hole.
I love that. And yeah, I think you just touched on something where you were part of the first cohort, and now we have 3 cohorts, which means that our alumni come June will be roughly 60 people. And like this network is, first of all, it's folks like you, incredible people, and seeing how different news leaders are collaborating on things, working with each other on inclusive hiring and just sharing knowledge and best practices is just incredible. And the fact that the 2 of you took the program 2 years ago, and it's still so relevant for you, right? And you're still referencing your notes and things you learned. To me, that is just so inspiring to hear as well. So yeah, so switching gears a little bit. what types of things have you actually put into practice from the program? So Kim, I know you mentioned some of the finance things, but what other classes or frameworks or things did you learn that that you put into practice, and maybe they worked, maybe they didn't, right?
A few things I use all the time. I actually use my capstone. I purposefully made my capstone something that I was going to implement in my newsroom. It mostly worked. I think there's some tweaks I would like to make to it, but that was really rewarding to have time to work on something. That was a very big thing for me and for my newsroom. And then I also do talk a lot about innovation cycles and how innovation works. And that helps a ton with speaking engagements, but also just like when I'm talking about what innovation is in my role to the rest of the newsroom, who might just be more like traditional journalists. And then I think the last thing I use a lot is there were a lot of workflows that we learned, four square charts to fill out things, effort, impact, like all of those are things that I use fairly regularly. Pretty much every project I work on that is innovation related, I put through at least one part of the process that we learned.
Amazing. How about you, Stanley?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is my capstone project. That ended up being this big body of work. It became a 2-year transformation project for the entire organization. We call it a strategic transformation project because it just touched on so many different areas, and how that helped really just change everything for us. We're probably 3 to 4 times bigger on every important metric since we started that program. So it's had it's just had a massive impact on our organization. I'm also coaching other newsrooms, one here in the UK, and I've given a couple of sessions, taken a couple of other groups through that capstone project and what we did and the results that we saw. And that's inspiring other newsrooms to kind of adopt something similar. So that's really cool to see, because we were trying to choose something that would not only help us, but also potentially help the industry. And I think we are doing that with that capstone project. And like Kim, also putting together sort of little training packages and courses, internal and sometimes external. The innovation one comes up quite a lot, thinking about something that can be quite daunting to a lot of people, especially newsroom people, and how to approach it in a way that sort of breaks it down and makes it more approachable, to think about how you can approach innovation. And so, yeah, quite a few training sessions relying on some of those notes, some of those materials that we went through in class, but then also using that to springboard into new places and to dive deeper on some topics, because we just can't cover everything in that time. But it was really useful to know that the next place to go to, we could go to with more confidence. And then it was, it's part of something that we know what good looks like, we know what best practice looks like, and so we could go and invest in those areas. So it continues to influence what we do in so many ways. I can see it. I know I can see all the different bits of the capstone book that are playing out in this 2-year project, but also know how to plan a 2-year change project. So it just keeps giving, I think, really, and beyond just referring back to those notes, but also thinking about where to go to next, which I think is really important.
I love that. That's incredible. Yeah. And, just talking about capstone specifically, they sound scary, right? When people think about them, they're like, oh my God, it's like this big body of work. And oh my God, I have my job and family, and then the program with the weekly classes, and then I got to work on my capstone. And it's a lot. It is. But what I have seen through being a coach and then running the program is that, and steering folks, obviously, is that like in preparing for your capstone and doing research, you're talking to interesting people, doing, you know, sort of unofficial research interviews, really, right? So that could be with folks within your cohort, previous cohorts, global newsrooms, whatever it might be. Like that, it's just so interesting, and also a way of networking. And then thinking about format and the way that you want your capstone to be presented, and then sort of the shelf life of it, really, right? Like all the two of your capstones are incredible, and not only a resource for your own organizations, but externally too, as you said, Stilly. And so that to me is just incredibly fantastic. And, you know, if this program can have that kind of impact, that's exactly what we want. So yeah, so I just have one more question for the two of you, and then of course I want to open it up for folks to answer questions too. But really, from both of you, and I'll start with Kim first, I would love to just hear what your biggest sort of key takeaways are from having taken the program.
This is very short and sweet, but you have everything you need to run the thing. You know, a lot of what I faced personally was a lot of imposter syndrome and feeling the need to over research and over plan for things that I thought that I would need, and the program helped me like work through which of those were actually necessary for me to learn, helped me learn those things. And I walked away a lot more confident in my own leadership skills.
Stilly?
Yeah, I think if I could describe it as having a map really to what good looks like, to knowing what to do, because you kind of, you know, especially if you're starting up an organization, there aren't, you know, there are no handbooks for this kind of stuff. So I definitely felt at the end of it, there was a much clearer sense of, you know, where to go, what to do, and to have the confidence to do that, and just having some kind of, you know, some kind of map. It doesn't necessarily have to be the most detailed in the world, but it gives you a good sort of outline of what you need to do. And yeah, just having that in your back pocket, and having people who are also walking their own maps and traveling their own maps that you can just reach out to. I mean, when we meet up every time, it's just so easy to you know, to catch up on things that people are doing. The conversations are so interesting. The things that people are doing are so great. It's great to hear about other people's successes and problems. You know, that make me feel good about my problems as well. That's also quite a good one. But I think just having that sense of direction has been really useful for me.
Amazing, thank you. Yeah, and Kim, you know, what you said about imposter syndrome, that's a really real thing. And I just taught a class actually for the cohort about imposter syndrome, right? Like recognizing when you're experiencing it, or if you see it in others, and how you can either build self-confidence or inspire and empower others, right, to sort of overcome that. And I'm sort of thinking of, you know, during our last residency, I did a class on leading with positivity. During the final residency, I think I'll teach a class on leading with empathy, right? Like these are all new things that we all need to think about, to focus on as we think of, you know, the modern era of newsrooms, right? And the fact that people like us want to disrupt things and change things for the better, because then and then only will the future of journalism be more secure, right? Because that's what keeps me up at night. So so yeah. All right, well, let's see if we have any questions in the chat, or if folks have questions they want to ask too, please don't hesitate, raise your hand. We'll happily call on you. Up to you if you want to go on camera or not, but if you have any questions for me or Kim or Stilly, please let us know. Or even if you just want to say hi, that's fine too. I see we have Crystal. Hi, Crystal, how's it going?
Nikita, there's a question in the chat for you.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Sorry. It's like sometimes with Zoom, it's hard to navigate windows.
And it's from Steve, who has his hand raised, so he could.
Steve, please go ahead. Hi, how are you?
How are you? Thanks again for making this time available. I think everybody's really appreciative. I know I am, and just being able to hear from you all is really helpful. I probably asked a couple questions at once, so apologize for that in advance. I noticed the cohorts range in size each year, and I was just curious what the methodology is there and what the size of the class will be this year. And in particular, I think we're all just curious, like what differentiates a candidate, what you're looking for or not for. And then you were talking a little bit about the capstones, and I'm curious if you can give any advice on, topics that work or topics to avoid, things like that. So just any guidelines on that type of thing would be grateful. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. So yes, in terms of the ideal size of a cohort, so around 20 people is usually what we aim for, because we do want the program to feel very intimate, right? For folks to have a strong bond and be able to share information, in the cone of friendship and learn from each other. And so that's kind of what we strive for each year. And then what we also strive for is diversity within that. So there's been typically, a great representation of women, journalists of color, and then globalization too is hugely important for us. Like, obviously we want journalists from the US to be part of these cohorts, but it's also important to have a great mix of international journalists and a nice balance there, because we can learn so much from each other, right? Whether you might be from the BBC to, we have an amazing gentleman in the cohort now, Pankaj Mishra from Factor Daily in India, right? Which is a grassroots organization out there. And so there's just so much strength in bringing an amazing diverse group together and learning. So that's kind of the makeup of the cohort. And then, yeah, in terms of people that we're looking for to be part of the program, really, it's folks like us, like news entrepreneurs, folks that have been in the business for a while, or that might be new to the industry, right? Like if you look at Silly, for example, he's an amazing case of that, of someone coming into the business, creating an organization, really a trailblazer out there in the world. And so, yeah, it's just someone who deeply is passionate about the future of news, sustainability, that cares about the quality of storytelling and community engagement, right? You could be a product thinker, you could be a business development person, just someone that wants to really understand the sort of meaning of the news leadership today. So I hope that helps to answer your question. I feel like you had one more question. About capstone projects. So capstone projects are actually one of my favorite things about the program, because ultimately, like, participants get to decide what they want their capstone to be about. So in some cases, it's where a local newsroom wants to build a regional or a national audience. So they're focused on a really big strategic audience development strategy. In other cases, a great example from this year's cohort, someone's working on an inclusive hiring blueprint, a whole strategy around DEIB and inclusive hiring. That is something that not only their own newsroom is going to benefit from, but the entire industry, right? Like, so we have people thinking about that, like, how can my capstone project benefit me in my current role, but also be a resource for the industry? We also have someone working on a capstone right now to do with onboarding, right? Like, that's incredible, because it's greatly needed in this sort of like hybrid world that we're now in, where some folks are back in an office partially and some may not be, and some may be entirely remote, right? Like, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, right? I'm not based in New York City anymore. And so to be able to like manage this program is amazing. And I'm thankful to our team, the J+ team at school, that they did such a great job onboarding me. But that's not always the case with certain organizations, right? So like that particular capstone is just going to, again, be such a great resource. So yeah, so hopefully those answered your question, Steve. So I'm just really glad to see you here today. We should connect after this.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course.
There's another question from Crystal in the chat.
Yeah. Hey, Crystal, feel free if you want to just go ahead and ask it too.
Her audio is not good right now, so that's why.
Oh, sorry. My bad.
No
Okay.
worries. She wants to know a little bit more about the schedule. So can you talk a little bit about what an average day would look like for a participant in the cohort? How often do they meet online in between like the residencies? And what is the kind of cadence of coaches, meetings with coaches?
Sure, yeah, great question. So as I mentioned, we have weekly classes. So once a week we meet for 2 hours. And we try to be time zone friendly just because this is a global program. And oftentimes I myself might be teaching, or we have an instructor, and we try to really think about the class format as an experience. So sometimes it's a mixture of instruction and then breakout groups or just different activities to make classes really engaging. And the great thing is that classes are often a break, right, from your everyday work life, family life, etc., for members of the cohort to focus on themselves, right? Whether they are dealing with something personally or professionally, classes can just be this really great forum. I can't remember if it was Kim or Stilly mentioned like therapy. Some of our classes often do feel like that. And that to me is incredible when you can come away from a class having learned something, when you've shared something, and you're again bonding with the cohort. And then in addition to that, we have Slack channels for each cohort. And so that's where we share like class materials and notes and things. And then really that's a community for members of the cohort to start interacting with each other and just sharing things and, working together on things. And that's really vibrant and wonderful. And then, as I mentioned, there are those 3 residencies in New York City. And then occasionally we might have the odd class that we stand up here or there, but really it's not too much of a daily thing, really, with the classes being weekly and then with those cadence of residencies. So typically the program doesn't take up too much time in general on a weekly basis, if that's helpful.
Can you talk also about the coaches? How often do you meet with your coach?
Absolutely, yes. Great question too. Thank you. Really, we kind of let each participant work that out with their coach once we make those introductions. So I met with my 2 mentees last year once a month, and then right before their capstone presentations, it was like bi-weekly, just because they wanted to practice with me, they wanted input and stuff. So really once we kind of do the pairings, we let folks kind of work on their own cadence. And sometimes you might do a Zoom for 30 minutes, once a month, or other times we see coaches working with their coaches asynchronously, whether they do that via email, Slack, or in a Google Doc or whatever that might be. So really that's kind of totally up to you. All right, I see we have a question from, is it Pius? Hi.
Hi, thanks so much for this meeting. My question goes to Stilly. Is he available to answer this question? I wanted to know what has been the influence of this course on Maverick. Well, in other words, what would Maverick have missed if he had not attended this course? Am I clear? I don't know.
Yes, yes, geez. I think we were on a path that would have been. I think we would have continued to grow, but I think we would have grown at a different rate, and we would have grown in a different way. And less changed so much since then that I think it's we would be in a very different place, and I thank the knowledge and the confidence and the opportunity to spend a year thinking about how we were going to change and really sharpening the axe for that change, so that when we did get involved in it and we did do it, that we pretty much hit every goal that we set ourselves to get in that change process, and then some, and even go beyond that. So the change for us has been profound. You know, I mentioned we are 3 to 4 times bigger on every metric, which is headcount, revenue, audience, supporting members, and a big chunk of that is down to the work that we did that flowed from the Capstone project, which flowed from the learnings from this. So I have a lot of gratitude to this experience and being able to participate in that and the learnings from this course.
Perfect. Thank you, Stilly. All right, so we have a question from Will. How's it going?
Good, thank you. This has been wonderful. Thank you very much for arranging this talk. When I was in journalism as an undergrad, we were broken up into newspapers, magazines, and broadcast, which is just like the most outdated. It was outdated when I was there, but that is how we were divided up. And I find I work in broadcast journalism now, and I was wondering if is there any differentiation from your perspective on, you know, written versus video product? Is there a focus on that in the course? Yeah, if you could just like talk about how you work with video product for a moment. Thank you.
Sure, yeah, that's a great question. And that is absolutely included in our product classes and audience development classes and whatnot, because we do recognize obviously that you need very different strategies for different formats. And so we talk about tons of formats. We talk about podcasts, we talk about newsletters, you know, we talk about a full spectrum of different products, whether you're from a legacy broadcast kind of organization, print organization. You know, we have folks in the current cohort from public broadcasting, both on the radio side and on the TV side as well. And so, you know, we definitely talk about all those kinds of formats, mediums, and strategies around that too. So, and I myself have a very, very sort of mixed background in local newspapers and TV, and then platforms, and now academia. So, so for me, you know, it's a mission to make this program really inclusive when you think about the sort of landscape of news organizations and the range of products as well. And I can relate to what you're saying. I went to college many moons ago. We won't talk about how many moons ago that was, but you could only pick then between, you know, print and broadcast. And so I gravitated towards broadcast, but then through my first internship, I ditched that, went straight into digital, and I learned everything I know pretty much in the field, right? And then being able to bring that and a whole range of knowledge out into the world through this program is incredible. So yeah, I hope that helped to answer your question. Yeah, thank you. I see we have a question from, I'm going to try and pronounce your name, Coralie-Sant. Is that correct? It's a beautiful name.
Thank you. Well, my last name is St. Louis, so Coralie St. Louis. So I have a question regarding some of the relationships that the alums and, you know, current members of the cohort, they're building. And I wanted to know how some of these relationships are able to translate into the work that they're doing in the newsroom as they move forward.
Amazing. Yeah. I'm not sure, Kim or Stilly, if you have any examples of that you want to share. But what I do know is that just through going to different events and industry things, we have a lot of folks that they might meet up for coffee, let's say, informally at like next week. Let's, for instance, like Perugia is happening, and many members of the alumni will be there and stuff and planning meetups. And sometimes myself, I will like be traveling and like bring some of our alumni together in person at events. And then that often just sparks a ton of conversation, and then just sometimes the creative juices start flowing of like, oh, hey, why don't we have a partnership around, it could be content distribution. You know, it could really run the gamut of like actual reporting projects as well. We've seen that starting to happen between different members of the cohort. So really, it's something we just love to encourage folks to kind of talk about and explore possibilities, just because part of being in the cohort and the alumni group is just that you're exposed to incredible people and you get to build relationships. And so we let folks kind of do this on their own, but we do encourage them to reach out to talk about these things. So yeah, I hope that helps to answer your question. I see we have Anita Zielina, my predecessor, has her hand raised, so maybe she has some good insights here too.
Hi, I just wanted to, thanks Nikita, just wanted to briefly jump in since I have like the 3-year, kind of hindsight of the alumni as well. And everything you said, Nikita, is totally spot on. I think what I'd add from looking back at the last few years, it's also become this kind of career support network. So what we are seeing now with having the 4th cohort incoming, we see that instructors have hired alumni have hired other alumni have become references for other current participants. So I think since it's all people in pretty senior leadership roles, whether that's in the startup or their media organization, it also becomes this kind of vouching for each other and being in each other's corner career network thing, which I think is also quite intriguing for many participants, because it's just very valuable to have 100 people who are kind of in your corner and went through the same thing and are willing to give you references and put your name down for promotions and stuff. So that's the only thing I'd add, Nikita.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you, Anita. Yeah. And we're also seeing where, like some people are planning panel discussions or things and events and whatnot, and also reaching out through the network too, right? And that to me is incredible when we see that happening. So, lifting each other up and giving each other opportunities in that way, to me is brilliant. And I see Stilly, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, just do a couple of practical ways where that played out for me. Some other people's capstone projects have become training material in my organization, like literally just do this, take this, implement this, and do this, and you'll be fine. And maybe in a couple of cases where others' capstones have also really helped us. One of the interviewees in my capstone project is now a service provider to us. And so that came out of that. There's obviously speaking opportunities that happen as well. And then just off the back of a recent conversation we had in Slack, Nikita, just a note to all staff about AI and how we're going to be adopting AI, and thinking about that finally got me off my backside to write that note. And that's now going out to my team in the next couple of hours, just how we're thinking and how we're approaching the use of AI and the back and forth that we had there, just with the various different resources and also seeing the demand for it in almost every other person's organization and newsroom, that kind of communication was necessary. And so there's big things and little things, and like you say, hiring and service provider opportunities. And I think we might even be syndicating Jeremy's newsletter soon, and so all sorts of amazing things that have come out of just being in and around people that you trust. I think once you go through something like this, you build up a very high level of trust that you can then do some really interesting things with, if you're open-minded and innovative in your approach.
Yeah, perfect. Great. All right. Do we have any other questions? Either feel free to put them in the chat, or of course unmute and ask away. After this, we will be sharing the slides, recordings, various links again to information on our website and the application form. And please don't hesitate to reach out to me again if you have any specific questions that came to mind that we didn't have a chance to address here. The more information that we have out there about the program, the better that will be, and the more informed you are. So, so that's our goal today and going forward. Hi, Julie, how's it going?
It's going well, thank you. Thanks again for hosting the session. I had two quick questions, and I'm sorry if I missed these answers earlier. Who are the coaches is one question. Are they drawn from your faculty? Are they drawn from industry? And then my second question is, are there pieces of the curriculum that are specifically geared toward not-for-profit media organizations?
Great questions. Thank you. Yes. So our coaches really run the gamut between just amazing industry leaders, and sometimes they might be friends of Newmark J School, and like Kim is a coach this year, even though she was, so like that's another opportunity in which like Kim is incredible. We want Kim to share and coach and just, be able to empower somebody else. And so another great example is Irving Washington. He was most recently CEO of ONA and is just an incredible force in the journalism sphere. So yeah, another one is David Smidra. So David was at Google for a long time and then part of Twitter's curation team. So we were colleagues. And so he's another example of one of our coaches. It really runs the gamut. Another coach is Liz Heron, who is a longtime journalist and has had many roles at the New York Times and other organizations. I think she was executive editor at HuffPost at one point. So yeah, so we try to like rotate coaches on an annual basis so that there's just, it's a myriad of different industry experts and thought leaders. So yeah, so that's your first question. Your second one was about nonprofits, right? And yes, so within our classes, we touch on for-profit, nonprofit, we touch on all kinds of different ventures because the landscape has changed so much. And we want to make sure that we're thinking of sort of business models and strategies and tactics for all facets of different types of newsrooms and how, there's not really a one-size-fits-all strategy, right? So that it really depends on what format your newsroom is. And so, yeah, we invite a lot of nonprofit leaders to be guest speakers. And of course, we want folks like that in our cohort. So in our second cohort, Sewell Chan was one of our members there. And so, he was able to share a ton of information and learnings about all the newsrooms he's worked at. During the program, he transitioned from the LA Times to leading the Texas Tribune, for example. We also had Evan Smith doing a fireside chat with us in our last residency, and that was just incredibly insightful too. So, and I worked at the 19th before I took this job after leaving Twitter, right? So I love the nonprofit space, and I think that's folks are doing like God's work in these newsrooms, in my opinion. So, so we try to be really mindful of the range of news organizations out there.
Thank you so much.
Of course, yeah.
Nikita, with these last few minutes, do you want to talk about just really briefly the application? What do they need to apply?
Absolutely. Thank you, Kyle. Yeah, so as I mentioned, applications opened last week and run through the end of June. Sorry, June 2nd, my bad. I've got end of June as a deadline for something else I'm working on. And basically what you need to have is a letter of intent. So basically, a short memo on why you are interested in the program, what you hope to get out of it, and just sharing some of your work experiences in there. And then 2 reference letters, just so folks can obviously vouch for you and, are supporters of you and can share why you'd be a great member of the cohort. And that's pretty much it, really. So the form is really short and sweet on our site. So once you fill that in, I would suggest applying sooner rather than later, by the way, because we will start having interviews and kind of kicking off that process. So initially what that might look like is a first conversation with me or someone from our panel of interview folks. So that could be with Anita Zielina, it could be with Jeff Jarvis, for instance, somebody from basically Newmark J School. And then, we kind of take a look at everybody that's applied and go through a selection process. And then in July is when we'll then be informing folks of whether they've been accepted into the program or not, and then having those sort of financial questions or discussions then about how that will break out, and we'll go from there. And then obviously the program itself starts in September, as I mentioned, September the 5th, so right after Labor Day here in the US. So yeah, I hope that kind of helps in terms of an initial timeline. Thank you for that, Kyle. Okay, so if there aren't any further questions, then we will wrap things up. But I just want to give a special shout out to both Stilly and Kim for joining us today and sharing their insights. And for you all too, for giving us your time today. This was super fun. Imagine if all classes are like this, and they kind of are really, in terms of sharing knowledge and information, tips, tricks, best practices. So if any of you have any thoughts or questions, again, we'll be sharing the slides, various links from here. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you want to have a conversation or have any other questions. So take care, everybody, and thank you all so much for joining us today. Bye.